Hey, yo, my name is Rocky Balboa. And that is my terrible impression of Sylvester Stallone. Welcome everybody to this special non-wrestling related video that I have planned for you guys. This is something that I was inspired to do with the recent release of Creed 2, a film that I saw last week. And I thought maybe I should do a movie review of that film. But then I thought, you know, I'm such a big fan of the Rocky movies. And I've said on this channel before that the original Rocky is my favorite movie of all time. I might as well just review the whole series. It's only 8 films, you know, and I've got a lot of strong opinions about every single one of them. So, yeah, I'll just go ahead and review the entire series, the entire Rocky. I guess now you could call it like the Rocky / Creed series, or the Rocky Creediverse, if you will. And yeah, these movies are very important to me. They're, you know, as far as film franchises go, you know, I'm a big fan of Godzilla, obviously. Anybody who's followed my channel knows I'm a big fan of the big guy. I love Star Wars. Anybody who followed my channel for any length of time knows that. I love the James Bond movies. I love the Die Hard movies. Back to the Future. The Marvel Cinematic Universe, I think, is a very strong series of films for the most part. The Universal Monster movies from the 30s and 40s. I'm a big fan of those. But if I had to pick a #1 favorite film franchise of all time, it's goddamn Rocky. So not only is Rocky my favorite film of all time, but this is my favorite series of films of all time. Because I mean, you've got 8 films in total now with the recent release of Creed 2. And I gotta say, I think I love almost every single one of these films except for 5. 5 is the black sheep of the series. Everything else is great. It's all gravy. And, you know, it's just, it's the most consistently entertaining film franchise I can think of. Like I said, I love almost every entry in the series. There's one down point in the entire franchise, and how many franchises can say that? When you look at a lot of horror franchises, you know, they kind of bounce up and down. The Star Trek films, there's the famous, you know, odds and evens rule, where the even number films are significantly better than the odd number ones. But with Rocky, I think they're all really good, except for the one. So, and, you know, here we are, it's 2018, and with the recent release of Creed 2, still going strong. And I was looking at the box office numbers, I'm like, Jesus Christ, it did really well at the box office. Even with Wreck-It Ralph 2 getting a really strong opening weekend, Creed 2 did really, really well. In its opening weekend. So this is a series that's been going on since 1976. It's my favorite film franchise of all time. It's never been rebooted. It's never been started over. It's never been remade, unless you count the Broadway musical that they did of Rocky, which kind of an odd choice for a Broadway musical. I've never actually watched or listened to it, but very interesting that they'd want to turn that film into a musical. But it's never been... It's never really been fucked with, I think is my point. It's never really been, except for around the time that 5 came out, it never really got oversaturated or overstayed its welcome. It's just, it's always kind of sort of stayed pure in that sense, where it's just consistently entertaining films. They're boxing movies, they're sports drama films with some great emotions, great entertainment value. You've got down-to-earth human drama, and you've got wild spectacle. So it really covers the whole wide base of everything you could ever want out of a movie. And I mean, as far as emotions go, I mean, this series has made me feel everything from humor to, you know, joy and laughter to tears to sadness and happiness and everything you could possibly think of in between. Anger. I felt every emotion possible while watching these movies. And it's amazing to me that, you know, again, we're 8 entries in and they're still able to come up with ways to keep it fresh, keep it exciting, and keep these movies working. So before I get into the movies themselves, I don't think any discussion about Rocky is really complete without talking about the lead actor, the one who brought him to life, Sylvester Stallone, who's had quite the career, a very interesting, bizarre career, to say the least, where he's kind of remembered as, or at least when I was growing up in the 90s, like he was kind of the butt of everyone's jokes, where he was just churning out bad movie after bad movie after bad movie, and he had just gotten labeled as like a parody of himself. And this was even after Rocky 5 had come out, so it was like Sylvester. I grew up with Sylvester Stallone kind of having the reputation of being a joke, and that always kind of upset me because I loved the Rocky films, and everyone would just make fun of this guy mercilessly. And in some ways, deservedly so. I mean, when you look at movies like Stop or My Mom Will Shoot, which was by far his worst movie. Movies like, well, I'll talk about some of his other films in a bit, but I just had such a love and admiration for the Rocky films. I always felt like Stallone deserved credit just for that. And, you know, a lot of the slings and arrows that were thrown his way, I felt like, it's like, yeah, I mean, yeah, that movie was a piece of shit and that one was a piece of shit, but he made the Rocky films. And this is before I even started watching Rambo, and before I saw Cobra, and before I saw Tango and Cash. And, you know, Stallone has this weird ability, especially when he's either writing or directing, which he, you know, he's heavily involved with the creative process of most of the Rocky films, if not all of them. He actually is a co-writer on Creed 2, so he's still, even after all these years, he's still involved. And, you know, he manages to tap into that part of our brains that want something really badass, and that kind of feral part of our brain that just wants something awesome. And even like lesser films like Judge Dredd, like people have made fun of that movie, and I'm not going to say it's a good movie, but it's weirdly entertaining in a way. Like it's not a good film, but it's an entertaining one, and it's not boring, and it's fun to watch. So it's always been amazing to me how Stallone is able to like tap into like this weird ability to make his movies strangely fascinating, even if they're bad. Like Over the Top, it's a movie about arm wrestling. I can't think of a less interesting topic for a movie than arm wrestling, but god damn it, it's like every time it's on TV, knowing that the movie's not that great, I will sit down and watch it because it's just so fascinating to watch. And I guess with Stallone, you take the good and the bad, and you have like a very interesting career. Especially he kind of came from nothing. He actually grew up in my area, like where I grew up. My mother knew him personally when they were kids. I won't tell any of the stories that she told me, but according to her, she did not like him when they were young kids. She did not like him. And another funny story: he got expelled from my high school, which is very interesting as well. I don't know what he did to get expelled. There were a lot of rumors and stories that were going around about how and why he got expelled from my school. I assume that he just flunked out. It's something really boring, but so you know, I think in our minds we kind of think, oh, it's Stallone. He probably drove a motorcycle into the cafeteria or something stupid like that. But no, but yeah, that was kind of a known thing at my school, that Stallone got expelled from my high school. So going back to my mom, when I started getting into the Rocky movies at a fairly young age, she would just sit there and just shake her head and be like, that kid was a punk in school, and now he's my kid's hero. It's like, what the fuck is going on here? So, you know, Stallone has a really, having grown up in this area, like a lot of people either knew him, like a lot of the older folks knew him and saw him grow up, and other people were kind of like, hey, this is where Stallone came from. So I think very similar to why I appreciate The Exorcist, which also happened very close to my hometown. I got like this weird, because Stallone grew up around here, I kind of have this weird like kinship with him. Like he's from my hometown. He's one of my guys. So to see him succeed and create these awesome string of films, I'm just like, yeah. That's my guy. And what is it about Stallone, specifically as Rocky Balboa? Because I could talk about all the action films and the Rambo films that he did, but there's something about him as Balboa that is just pure movie magic, and that's in all the films. You know, the way he talks and the way he carries himself and how he's got like a humility to him, this down-to-earth quality to him, even in like the more bombastic films like 3 and 4, there's something very human about him, and I think it's because he's a very unconventional actor. He's not like a Brad Pitt or a Matthew McConaughey or anything like that. He is kind of this mumbling palooka that somehow he looks unconventional. Not that he's an ugly guy, he just looks very unconventional. He's got these basset hound eyes. He looks like Rocky Balboa, like how what you pitched the story of Rocky Balboa to me, that's how I would picture he would look like. So when, you know, the stories about how the first film got made and how he, when he was pitching it to the studios, he insisted that he star in the film. I actually agree with that decision, because I can't picture too many actors, like traditional actors, being able to play that part with the legitimacy and with the conviction and with the believability that Stallone did. And that's throughout the entire series. So jumping into the first film, 1976, the original Rocky, I've said before it's my favorite film of all time because it's the ultimate underdog story. It's the ultimate down on your luck, this regular Joe Schmo, low-level fighter, loan shark for, or he's a, as Mickey put it, he's a leg breaker for loan sharks. Kind of lower end of the economic scale, just about as regular as a guy can be. And he gets the opportunity of a lifetime to fight the world heavyweight champion on a grand stage. And he takes the opportunity and makes the most of it. And it's a very inspirational tale of, trying your best. And I think that's part of why the film resonates with me and why it resonates with so many people to this day. It's not about ultimately succeeding. It's about pouring your heart into what you do, and trying is the success, and trying your absolute damnedest. That is the success right there, and going the distance, and being able to leave your mark and prove that you're not just some Joe Schmo. You're not what the world says you are. And I think a lot of people can identify with that, and I think a lot of people can resonate. I think that story resonates with a lot of people. And a lot of the elements of the story just feel very humble and real. His relationship with Adrian, which is quintessential to the film's magic and making it work. You see those two together, and they're just so goddamn cute together, aren't they? They are just adorable. And again, and I'm not putting her down, I like that Talia Shire, who played Adrian, is not like this drop-dead bombshell, because I think if they were casting the movie today, they would get Jennifer Lawrence or somebody like that to play it. Somebody who's really, classically Hollywood pretty, but Talia, not ugly, she's just a very normal-looking girl, and the way they dressed her up in this film, she looked about as plain can be, and that made it more believable. That made, again, that human, humble, raw, realistic element that made the first movie so great. That was essential, and this is one of and the entire series has benefited from this, but the entire series has benefited from excellent casting, and I don't think it was ever better than in this film. When you look at Burt Young as Paulie, who's this, and I'll talk about Paulie as I get into the sequel, specifically Rockies 4 and 5, but you can't picture anybody else being that guy. He's just this ultimately becomes Rocky's brother-in-law, not in this film, but in the second film. And he's a really huge jerk, and you think, God, why does Rocky put up with this guy? But then he has these weird, moments of redemption. He's like, oh, okay, that's why you put up with him. It's all right. But deep down, way deep down underneath the crust, Paulie's a good guy, and we see that as the series progresses. You get Burgess Meredith, who I adore for a multitude of reasons. He was the Penguin in the original Adam West Batman. He was Globulus in G.I. Joe the movie. He had that memorable role in The Twilight Zone. Burgess Meredith, just a terrific actor. He was in Clash of the Titans. I remember watching him in that at a very young age. So Burgess Meredith was a big part of my youth, even before I started watching the Rocky movies. So to see him in this, that was he may have been my gateway into getting into these films. When I saw Burgess Meredith was in it, I'm like, oh, I'm in with this. So all right, I gotta watch Burgess. And him is Mickey, the grizzled trainer who's also down on his luck and has also dealt with a life of hardship and getting screwed over by the sport of boxing. And he's very butts heads with Rocky initially, and they have their disagreements. And then when it comes time for Rocky to get the shot of a lifetime, he becomes Rocky's trainer. Which, a fantastic scene, by the way, where he proposes to Rocky that he be his trainer, and Rocky's hesitant at first because of how poorly Mickey treated him. And then he ultimately comes around. I think that might be the best acted moment in the entire film from both Stallone and Burgess Meredith. And you can't picture anybody else playing that character. It's got to be Burgess. There's no other. He is Mickey. That, you're gonna eat lightning and you're gonna crap thunder rock. Women weaken legs. I love Burgess Meredith. He's just terrific in this. So, it's just, you get all these elements, and it combines into this wonderful story that's edited beautifully. I mean, when you look at the training montages and all the stuff that goes into making Rocky this sympathetic character, like little things like walking little Marie home, and again the training montage where he gets better, he gets stronger, and the song "Gotta Fly Now." And music has always been a huge part of the Rocky series, specifically the music by Bill Conti, and "Gonna Fly Now," which is like, yes, a lot of that music is on my workout playlist because it has to be, and you can't picture any other music going along with this film. It's just about as iconic as an audio experience can possibly be. And all of that is just beautiful, and it all builds to this boxing match where the world heavyweight champion Apollo Creed, who's very clearly based on Muhammad Ali, but played wonderfully by Carl Weathers, who, again, I can't picture anybody else playing this part. I know I compared him to Muhammad Ali, but Carl Weathers is so great in this role that it's his role. Like, there's no one else that can be Apollo Creed. He is Apollo Creed whenever I watch these films. And, overconfident, when he has the moment where he picks Balboa, he's like, no, it's the name. I need the spectacle. I need the spectacle to make the fight a worthwhile attraction. I'll drop him in 3. It doesn't matter. But it's like that name, Rocky Balboa. That'll look good on the card. Look good on the matinee or whatever. And doesn't really take the fight as seriously. And then you have Rocky who's punching the meat, drinking the raw eggs, doing all those iconic moments that we remember from the series. And it all comes ahead to this boxing match where Rocky is just bound and determined, realizing that he can't beat Creed. He has this epiphany the night before the fight. I can't beat him. And he's talking to Adrian, I can't beat him, but I want to go to the distance just to prove that I can take everything that he's got. And if I can take everything that he's got and I'm still standing, then I'll prove that I'm worth something. And ultimately, Rocky does go the distance after a brutal fight, one of the most brutal fights in the series. And the boxing match climax is a staple of the series, and they almost become like, it makes you wonder if, pro wrestling fans would ever assign star ratings to any of those, because they're really like, we're here for the boxing match, but really it's the journey to get to the boxing match that really makes it matter. And by the time you get to the fight, you really want Rocky to win. And after they just beat the holy hell out of each other, Rocky famously with the makeup, cut my eye, Mick. I gotta open my eye, cut my eye. That whole sequence, he goes the distance. The final decision is that Apollo Creed wins by judge's decision, but Rocky is like, when everybody rushes to the ring after the fight's over and the final bell is rung, and the music's swelling up, and you get that beautiful moment where Rocky's ignoring the reporters, he's ignoring the announcement of who won the fight. He did what he wanted to do. He went the distance. He just wants his Adrian. And, the iconic yelling, Adrian! Adrian! And then Adrian makes her way down to the ring to embrace her man. And by the way, talk about a Paulie redemption. Like, at the very end, he holds the rope for Adrian to let her into the ring to go embrace Rocky. And they declare their love for each other. And it's this sweet ending that brings a tear to my eye every time I see it. Actually, when Adrian walks out on the stage, as the 14th round is coming to a close, that moment always brings a tear to my eye every time I see it. And, their relationship and their bond is quintessential to this plot in this movie. And throughout the entire series, while Adrian didn't always play an important role in each movie, their relationship strengthens Rocky. And she's his foundation, his whole world, and he is much stronger with her than without her, as we'll see in some of the future entries. But the original Rocky is an absolute classic. One of, I've already said it's my favorite movie of all time, and it jump-started this wonderful film franchise that has given me a ton of great memories that I'm going to get into right now. We follow that up with 1979's Rocky II, a sequel that is really about where Stallone was at this point in his career. Was he just a one-hit wonder? Did he just have Rocky in him and that was it? And Rocky II is about, okay, he had the fight of his life against Apollo Creed, and he went the distance and everything. What's going to happen when those 15 minutes of fame are up? And you really do see how fleeting fame really is, as Rocky is like, I'm retired from fighting and I can live off of doing commercials and doing these other things. He blows through the money way too fast, which again is for a guy who's never had money before, it makes sense that he would blow through it as quickly as he did. Very impulsive. he marries Adrian. They have a kid together, but there are some complications. I'll get into that in a little bit. And we get to see Rock at this point where his 15 minutes of fame are up, and now he's trying to figure out, all right, what do I do now? I'm trying to build a family, but I need to have a job. Do I go back to fighting after I said I'd retire? And then on the other end of that, you have Apollo Creed, who has advanced beautifully in this film. I mean, you want to talk about character development. Carl Weathers is so great in this movie. I would say that this is his best performance as Apollo. Because the reaction to the first fight, where everyone's calling him a fake, they fixed the fight. Some people said he didn't really win the fight, that Rocky was the true winner, and he's got all this doubt. He wants to prove all the doubters wrong, and he wants to put the bum in his place. So he's goading Rocky into a rematch, setting himself up as the bad guy to do it, as his PR team put it. And actually, one of my favorite scenes in the entire franchise, and I haven't mentioned him yet, but Tony Burton, who plays Apollo's trainer, played him in Rocky 1, Rocky 2. He helps train Rocky in Rocky 3, trains Rocky in Rocky 4. He has a brief cameo in Rocky 5, and he comes back to train Rocky in Rocky Balboa. So he's like low-key like one of the most important or one of the most prevalent characters in the entire franchise. And he was never like, he's kind of like Boba Fett in that way, where he was never really like essential to the plot, but he always left his mark. And I think, especially when I get into Rocky 4, and I'll talk about some of his moments in there, but in Rocky 2, he has one of my personal favorite moments in the entire franchise, where he vehemently tries to talk Apollo Creed out of a rematch with Rocky. And in the first movie, he was the one's like, all right, this guy's a southpaw. I don't want you messing with no southpaw. He was like, he's punching meat, Apollo, and he's doing all these crazy training things. He's taking this fight seriously, Apollo. You should really watch what you're getting yourself into. And in this film, he was like, I want you to beat that man like I've never seen no man get beat before. And the man kept coming after you. I know what you're feeling. Let it go. You're the champ. Let it go. And very prophetic, I guess you could say, from Tony. But that moment is so great, and such a wonderful moment from Tony Burton. And a lot of people, when they hear the words "Let it go," they think of Frozen. When I hear "Let it go," I think of that scene from Rocky 2, because it's one of my absolute favorite scenes in the entire franchise. But Apollo Creed is determined to get that rematch and prove all the doubters wrong and put Rocky Balboa in his place. So he's taking the fight a lot more seriously this time. Rocky eventually agrees to the fight. The rematch is set. And I think once that happens, where this movie really goes into great sequel territory is that it really advances the relationship between Rocky and Mickey. Where in the first film, you get that great scene in Rocky's apartment where they agree to work together, where Mickey would be his trainer. Here, this is the movie where I feel like they really become friends, and they become like as close as family. Where Mickey is just running him ragged, trying to train him to be a right-handed boxer. And that would become a staple of the series, where Rocky would have to learn to fight in some new way to kind of beat his opponent. And he's trying to train Rocky, but Rocky's mind isn't on the match because Adrian is pregnant, and Adrian doesn't want him to go through with the fight, and he's having all these doubts of whether or not he should do it. And then Adrian ultimately has complications with the pregnancy that results in her going into a coma, which destroys Rocky. His son is born prematurely, and he keeps a constant vigil at the hospital. And when visiting hours are up, he goes straight to the hospital chapel. And Mickey, who has been frustrated with Rock throughout the entire film, realizes like, Rocky, you're blowing this, and in the previous movie, Rocky had his eye injured, and that becomes a point in this film where Mickey was trying to develop a strategy that would protect the eye and fight right-handed and all these other things, and Rock's just kind of throwing it all away, and Mickey is just getting frustrated with him. But when he sees like how down and out Rocky is at the potential loss of Adrian and just waiting for Adrian to be okay, Mickey gives this impassioned speech about you got another shot at the title, and he's gonna kick your face in to prove that it was some kind of a freak the last time. And I love how my Burgess Meredith sounds nothing like Burgess Meredith, but bear with me. But it comes to this beautiful moment where he's like, if you're gonna blow it, kid, I'm going to sit here and blow it with you. And he stays and keeps the vigil with Rocky until Adrian's okay. And that is, to me, that's the moment where Rocky and Mickey really become as close as family. And Adrian is obviously okay. She comes out of her coma. They see the kid, and then Adrian looks at Rocky and tells him to go win. And once you get that moment, that now Rocky's got all the motivation he needs. He catches that chicken, which Mickey has him chasing chickens, which is a pretty funny bit. And he does the classic training montage where he comes through and all the kids are chasing him up the classic Rocky steps, which I amazingly haven't talked about. But I mean, the Rocky steps to me is like, and yes, I have visited them. They're like, that's like holy ground to me. That is just like, I mean, that is so just purely awesome. Like that site, and you can see so much of the city from that site. That it's just such an awesome visual, and one of my favorite, like, I guess you could call it a movie set, for lack of a better word, of all time. And I always love it when it gets incorporated into these movies, and it's always getting incorporated in great ways. And so Rocky's prepared for the fight with Apollo. Adrian's watching the fight from home. And now, up to this point, again, this movie did what every sequel should do. It raises the stakes emotionally and makes you really want that rematch. It's like, oh my God, can Rocky win this time? Is Rocky going to win this time? And after a wild fight that ends with both guys knocking each other out and both of them trying to get up to their feet, and in typical like WWE last man standing rules, Apollo falls down at 9 and collapses. Rocky gets up at 10, wins the fight and wins the World Heavyweight title. We get that classic moment where Rocky raises up the belt and says, "Yo, Adrian, I did it!" And the tears come rolling down my face every time I see it. It is a beautiful moment, beautiful ending to a fantastic sequel. I think of the original Rocky as the best in the series. I think Rocky 2 is number 2 on that list. It does everything you could ever want a sequel to do. Like I said, it raises the stakes, it provides character development, it strengthens the relationships. The development of Apollo is great, the development of the bond between Rocky and Mickey is great, the development of Rocky and Adrian's relationship is great, and all the dramatic elements are great. It's very, very good, and a superb sequel, and an easy pick for second best entry in the series for me. And then the series takes a turn, makes a huge change with Rocky 3, 1982's Rocky 3. We're in the 80s now, and this one, again, all the movies kind of reflect where Stallone was at in his career at this point. And by this point, Rocky, much like Stallone himself, was on top of the world. He was a huge star. He was the man. He was one of the biggest stars in the world. Now Rocky is the defending world heavyweight champion, 10 successful title defenses, and is on top of the world. He's rich, he's famous, and he's got everything that he could ever want. But he's got this hungry young fighter, Clubber Lang, played by Mr. T. I say played by because he basically is just being Mr. T in boxing as a boxer. But the end result was a more action-packed, colorful, and spectacle-filled film than what we were used to previously. So some of the human element is gone, some of the believability is gone, but it's replaced with over-the-top entertainment and just a wild time all around. I mean, you look at scenes like the scene where Rocky gets into a wrestler versus boxing match with the man who would ultimately become known as the immortal Hulk Hogan, here playing Thunderlips. That whole sequence is amazingly entertaining, very exciting, and great. Doesn't service the plot at all, but it just shows like it just serves as a microcosm of what this movie is like and what this movie's all about. And you get that moment where Rocky's about to announce his retirement, and Clubber Lang officially challenges him, makes some dirty passes at Adrian, and that pisses Rocky off. They unveil the statue, and then Clubber Lang just ruins the entire thing. The classic Rocky statue, which is one of the greatest movie props of all time. And Mickey reveals he doesn't want to take the fight because he had been handpicking Rocky's opponents to protect his health. And it's like, Rocky, you've grown soft, you've become civilized, you're not the fighter you were back when you fought Apollo, and you can't beat this guy. He's a monster, he'll kill you inside of 3 rounds. And Rocky wants to take the fight and gets Mick to train him. And Rocky's not taking the training seriously. They go to like this really crowded gym where they sell Rocky merchandise everywhere and girls are hitting on him and everything, and he's just not taking it seriously. Because why should he? He's had 10 title defenses. He's fine. It's just another fighter. And right before the fight begins, Clubber Lang shoves Mickey, and Mickey has a heart attack. And at this point, I remember the first time watching it and just going, no, not Mickey, not Mickey. Rocky goes out there, has the fight with Clubber while Mickey is being tended to in the locker room. And Clubber Lang absolutely destroys Rocky, beats him inside of 2 rounds. And so Rocky's lost the title, and then he immediately goes backstage to go check on Mickey. And then Mickey dies while thinking that Rocky won the fight, which is also a tragic element. He thinks that Rocky won the fight and passes away peacefully. And one of the saddest moments in the entire series, and the first major loss of Rocky's career, Rocky's time as a character and all the time he spent with him. Loss is something that Rocky would have to deal with a lot more as the series progresses, but this was the first major loss, not just the title, but losing Mickey, losing his support, losing his trainer, the father figure who'd been supporting him since the first fight with Apollo. And that whole segment breaks my heart every time I watch it with the music, and then Rocky stops believing in himself and everything, but Apollo Creed comes out of the shadows and agrees to train Rocky to win the title back from Clubber Lang. And I love this story because there's just something appealing about an enemies become friends storyline. And Apollo was such a likable character even when he was being a jerk in Rocky 2. Carl Weathers is just so magnetic and so charismatic that having them become allies in this one, I think was a natural place to take the story. And I think was... made it a lot more interesting, a lot more entertaining, and helps the sequel stand apart from all the rest. And again, you know, music being a huge part of the Rocky series. You get Eye of the Tiger. I have to talk about Eye of the Tiger, one of the greatest songs of all time. You can't hear that song and not think about Rocky. It's just the two go hand in hand with each other. And it debuted with this film and became one of the greatest pieces of music in any film ever, in my opinion. But Apollo has to help Rocky find the Eye of the Tiger, get that hunger back. But now that he's been defeated by Lang, he's lost Mickey, he realized that Mickey fixed all his fights for him. He doesn't believe in himself anymore, and he's afraid. He's got things to lose. And losing Mickey is like, God, I've got stuff to lose now. I'm not just some schlub from, you know, the streets that has nothing to lose. I've got everything to lose now. And I don't think I can beat Lang. And that leads to Adrian giving this passionate speech. You know, again, she's the strength. She's his backbone, his support, his legs, everything. And she gives him this passionate speech that helps set him straight and to fight his fears and everything. And then we get another fantastic training montage. Although I could have done without like the little biker shorts that Apollo and Rocky were wearing. Yeah, basically in this film, Apollo and Tony, Apollo's trainer, they train Rocky to fight like Apollo Creed. Like, as Paulie put it in this film, like a colored fighter. Don't mean to go that route with it. I'm just quoting the movie. Paulie, who's back to being a jerk in this one, but again, like, starts off the movie as a drunken jerk who, like, he's mad at Rocky for not giving him a job, and then Rocky gives him a job. He's like, okay. And it's like, that opening scene, you kind of feel like Paulie, is the movie setting up Paulie to, like, betray Rocky at some point, but that doesn't really happen. If anything, he redeems himself because he runs in and helps Rocky against Thunderlips during that whole sequence, and he helps him train and everything, so, and stands in his corner for the fight with Clubber Lang. So it's like, Paulie, it's like, you know what, he's a jerk, but he's always there when Rocky needs him, and Paulie really wins me over in part 4, which we'll talk about in a bit, but this film was massively entertaining, and has all the things that again, it's more over the top than the previous two Rocky films, and it's very colorful and very action packed, and I think that works for a lot of people. It works for me. Some people don't think as highly of this one because it lacks the believable humanity of the previous two films, but it's like, hey, if you're gonna go crazy, go all the way with it, and this film went all the way with it. And you know, this movie is 80s as fuck, with Eye of the Tiger, Hulk Hogan, Mr. T running around, and just some of the craziness going on. So but you do get those emotional moments, like with Rocky, and like with or when Mickey dies, and like when with Adrian's speech to Rocky. So you do have that human element there, and just the whole idea of enemies becoming friends between Apollo and Rocky, that stuff's great, and that really helps set, that to me was the heart of the film, the fact that, you know, these two characters that were enemies before are now ultimately become best of friends. And that all leads to the rematch with Clubber Lang, which I really enjoyed this fight, even though this is the one where the sound effects for the hits really got a little ridiculous, where every hit kind of sounds like an explosion. And I was like, it kind of takes me out of it a little bit. It's like, you could have used different sound effects for that. But other than that, I think the fight's a lot of fun, mainly because it normally we were used to Rocky going the distance and going the full 15 rounds and them like using a montage to kind of cover that stretch of time rather than giving us a full fucking fight. Here, the match only lasts a few rounds and we get to see the full fight. It's very good and very entertaining and very fun, with Rocky kind of goading Clubber Lang into punching himself out. You ain't so bad. You ain't so bad. At least I ain't breathing heavy. I was like, whoa, great comeback, Rock. But, everything about this film is just so entertaining. Of course, Rocky wins in the end, to the surprise of no one. And Rocky and Apollo ultimately have a fight behind closed doors with mutual respect, and Apollo wanting to fight Rocky at his best to prove that it's like, all right, let's see once and for all who the better man is in the ring. But a very respectful and friendly fight. If you will. God, I could sit here and talk about this film all day because there's so much going on. It's but this one's a wild one. This one, you get the death of a character, you get crazy music, crazy characters running around. It's got Mr. T in it, so it's going to be crazy. I could sit here and quote a lot of his stuff all day. Dead meat. What's your prediction for tonight's fight? Pain. Just terrific. It's all just great. And Rocky 3, not as good as the first two, but it's still a solid A film for me. Very entertaining and very good. Then we get to 1985's Rocky 4. And my take on this film has really evolved over the years, because as a kid, I hated this one because it pushed the ridiculous buttons so hard that I just couldn't accept it. It was just too cartoony to me, even as a kid. Now, I can sit there and watch Godzilla movies all day. I can watch Star Wars. I can watch pro wrestling. But for some reason, Rocky 4 was just too much for my my 8-year-old brain to handle. And I was like, this movie's too stupid. This is just beyond stupid. But as time has gone on, I've learned to appreciate the film for how absurd it is and how ridiculous it is. And now it's become one of my favorites in the entire series. It's just so over the top and so entertaining. And it really, more than any other film in the series, it taps into that primal badassery, gets me pumped, gets me jacked up. Have I done workouts while this movie's playing on the TV? Yes, I have. That's how excited this movie gets me. It's just the most raw an exciting film of the entire franchise. And a lot of people feel the same way I do. It's like, this one's just the most badass. And it's purely just a colorful, over-the-top spectacle. How do I want it? Like an action film, basically. It's not even like, we're beyond like boxing drama at this point. This is just straight up like 1980s action film at this point. Now, what happens in this film? Well, in the midst of the Cold War, we have a Russian boxer that wants to get into the professional ranks. One Ivan Drago, who was an Olympian and a Soviet Union soldier. And he has been trained as like this guinea pig, injected with steroids and various other things. But he wants to get into the professional boxing world and is going to perform in America and wants to fight American fighters. Comes in, has an exhibition it was supposed to be against Rocky, but Apollo took the fight instead because Apollo wanted to prove that he still got it, and he wanted to, humiliate the Russian. Because Apollo Creed is kind of like the symbol of America. Like, he made himself like a mascot for America, so he wanted to fight the Soviet and, humiliate him and put him in his place. And here's where the series takes a shocking turn, to say the least. Now, they spoiled it in the trailer. Fortunately, I didn't see the movie until years after the fact, so I didn't see the trailer, so it wasn't spoiled for me. Why they would give that away in the trailer, I don't know, but Ivan Drago kills Apollo Creed. What the fuck? In the middle of the ring, he fucking kills him. What? What? As a kid, I was like, what is going on? Like, I didn't even get, it wasn't like Mickey, when Mickey died, where I got sad. I was just like shocked, like my jaw dropped. I'm like, he died? What is going on? This is crazy. This is madness. And it's just, wow, this movie really went to some dark places. Really insane, really just crazy stuff. And because Apollo died, Rocky feels he has to avenge his friend, so he takes the fight with the Russian, and they have their big fight on Christmas Day in Russia. and in front of a hostile crowd, Rocky goes in there to fight the Russian. Now, this movie is light on plot. You really only need those broad strokes to get to the point. Most of the movie is just montages, because you get all these montages from training montages, which are wonderfully edited, by the way. That's something I've really learned to appreciate the more I've watched this movie. It's like these montages are edited really well, the way they cut back and forth between Rocky and Drago, but not a lot of like story beats here. It's pretty much like, all right, I want to fight Drago. Adrian doesn't think he should do it, famously says, "You can't win!" And at that point, it's like, yeah, I just watched Ivan Drago murder a guy in the ring. I kind of don't want you to be tussling with this crazy machine-like Russian. I guess I'll talk about Drago right now. One of the best villains in the series. And I'll talk more about him when I talk about Creed 2. But as an opponent for Rocky, he's just this stone-cold, machine-like robot, like monster or something else. He's larger than life. And again, hyping up like the action movie aspect of it. He doesn't even feel like he exists in the realm of reality. At one point they mention he hits 4 times harder than the average boxer. And I'm just like, he should kill Rocky in like 4 hits then. Like, Rocky should be dead like within the first round. And but again, this is just paints like the more like cartoony nature of this whole thing. He's got like a you know, for you WWE fans out there, if you're wondering who Lana was based off of, you know, Lana and Rusev, I guarantee you Bridget Nielsen's role, who Bridget Nielsen was attached to Stallone at the time, romantically, which is probably how she got this part, but Bridget Nielsen plays Ivan Drago's wife, who's also his, like, interpreter and spokesperson, and she's basically the voice of Ivan Drago, and she's got a very cold, unlikable demeanor, which he does carry over into Creed 2 as well. Sorry for the Creed 2 spoiler, but you know, it is what it is. And yeah, there's a lot going on here. For do I want to talk about every single training mine? Well, I guess I'll talk about the music. Vince DiCola, who I know as the composer for the soundtrack to Transformers the movie, which is awesome. You know, that synth 80s, you know, soundtrack just sounds incredible for Transformers. It works for Rocky as well. We don't get much of the Bill Conti music, and Gonna Fly Now is actually left out for the first time, but when you've got Hearts on Fire, which is fantastic, just a great song, also on my workout playlist. You got some songs from Survivor. You get Eye of the Tiger returning in the opener, of where you get the 2 boxing gloves punching each other and exploding. Great. This movie, that really set the tone for the film. When you see like a US flag boxing glove and a Soviet Union boxing glove colliding and exploding, that set the tone for what type of film you were going to see. And yeah, the music's great, the montages, the training these are probably the most badass training montages in the entire series. When you look at like how hard Drago was pushed by his scientists and trainers, I guess. And then you look at Rocky, who's out in the wilderness, like living like a hobo, just, you know, using rocks and sticks and trees and cutting trees down and pushing wheelbarrows and doing all these things to get strong and climbing a mountain, because why the hell not? Forget the steps. He climbs mountains now. All that just looks so cool and so badass. And I got to tell you, the last time I saw this film, I thought, man, I kind of want to try those upside down. Like, he would do these push-ups where he's dangling from, like, a high platform and, like, do sit-ups, like, while hanging in midair. And I'm like, I kind of want to try that, but I don't know if that's a smart idea. But that's another thing about these movies. They inspire me to work out. So, you know, improving the health of Americans every time somebody watches it. But as far as, like, other character moments go, Adrian doesn't have the biggest role to play in this. Paulie has arguably his best moment in the entire series, and no, it's not when he gets the robot as a birthday present, which probably the most bizarre moment in the entire franchise is when Paulie is gifted with this talking robot that seems to have some level of artificial intelligence. It's like, where the hell is, like, what? Where did this come from? Yeah, we never see the robot again after Rocky IV, and that's probably for the best. But Paulie probably has his best moment where as Rocky's walking in the hallway of the arena and he's going to go out towards the ring, Paulie talks to him and gives him like this heart-to-heart where he's like, if I could unzip myself and be anybody, I'd want to be you. And he's like kind of like fighting back tears and everything. And it's like, oh my God, he thinks Rocky's gonna die. And so this is his last chance to tell Rocky what he really thinks about him. And it's like, oh, Paulie, that's so... So every Rocky movie has a moment that brings a tear to my eye, and that's it for Rocky IV. And a movie that's so like raw and badass and just over the top crazy, it does have that one genuine moment where I'm just like, right in the feels, man. And then you get Tony, who, like I said, was Apollo's trainer and now is training Rocky for this fight. Reveals that Apollo was like a son to him, and losing Apollo was just devastating for him. You got that. I'm sure you guys have seen the meme of during the Apollo Drago match where he's yelling for Rocky to throw the towel. Throw the towel! Throw the damn towel! Just a wonderful acting moment. Great stuff. And once again, leaving his mark, even though it's not the biggest role, he leaves his mark on the franchise and in this entry. And that leads us to the climactic battle, which I guess we'll call it that at this point, where it goes beyond any known rules of boxing, where they're throwing each other around, they're wrestling each other, they're hitting each other after the bell for each round. It's just this wild melee of a fucking fight. And Tony actually has my favorite moment of his in the entire series, where Rocky finally does damage to Drago and draws blood on him. He's like, you cut him! You hurt him! You see? He's not a machine! He's a man! It's like, god damn, it's so badass. It's just so great. And that's really the best way to describe this film. It is just so goddamn badass. And, you know, realistic? Not at all. Grounded? Not at all. But it is so entertaining and gets me so jacked up every time I watch it that it taps into, like, this raw... I guess macho, animalistic side of me that needs to be fed once in a while, and Rocky IV is just one of those movies that really helps feed the hunger that side of me really needs. And you get to the fight. They go 15 rounds. It's a wonderfully edited fight with great use of slow-mo and making the hits look really, really good in those shots. And you get that moment where Ivan Drago picks up picks up, I guess, his manager by the throat, even though he's wearing a boxing glove, picks him up by the throat, throws him down and says, I fight for me. I fight for me. And God, this movie's just so crazy. Probably the craziest, most unbelievable thing to happen in the movie is the Soviet crowd starts off cheering for Drago and booing Rocky, and then as the fight progresses, Rocky wins them over. I'm like, that would never happen in a million years. Like, not even today. That would never happen. But again, it's a crazy. This is the craziest Rocky movie, and with that, I gotta give it props for being so entertaining and so crazy that with all the flaws, and maybe there were a few too many montages, and maybe there's a few things that don't make sense, and maybe it's a little too crazy, but it's just so exciting and so entertaining. I can't help but love this film. And again, I started off not liking it, but it's certainly won me over in my adult years. And of course, Rocky wins and gives that memorable speech that people have jokingly said ended the Cold War. If I can change and you can change, everybody can change. Beautiful. And then we get Hearts of Fire playing one more time as we roll credits. I'm like, oh God, the movie's so badass. So yeah, this is a movie that's very much a product of its time, but in the best possible way. It's a wonderful time capsule of the 1980s and what things were like. And for me, it's one of the most entertaining Rocky films ever made. And I love the film. It's great. So yeah, again, warts and all, I think the film is fantastic. So we get a little bit of a break from the Rocky films. The next one would happen 5 years later in 1990. We get Rocky V, go for it, where we have the original director, Mr. Advidson, returning to direct the film, and this was meant to be Rocky's big send-off. And by this point, like I said, these films kind of reflect where Stallone's at in his career. Here, by this point in Stallone's career, the bloom was coming off the rose. Movies like Stop or My Mom Will Shoot were coming out. He was becoming a parody of himself, not picking the best film projects. And then you get Rocky V, which is kind of his baby and his bread and butter. And it's the worst film in the series. It's like, oh, that's not so good. And here, Rocky is brought back to square one, where in the most convoluted plot point in the entire series, Rocky ends up losing all of his money because Paulie signed over Rocky's power of attorney to Rocky's like financial advisor or something like that. And I'm like, there is no way in holy hell that would hold up in any court of law. That is so convoluted and stupid that it makes absolutely no sense. So Rocky loses all his money, and all of this coming at a time where he suffered severe brain damage after the fight with Ivan Drago, and probably the movie's best scene, where we pick up right where the fight with Drago left off, and Rocky calls for Adrian to come see him in the locker room because he's shaking. He's like, he can't stop himself from shaking, and he's like broken, and he's like a nervous wreck, and he doesn't know what's going on. He's like he fought so hard that he broke something, as Mick used to put it, and Rocky seems like completely out of it. And it's one of the scariest scenes in the entire franchise. And it really, I thought the first time I watched this film, I thought, oh my God, what are we in for now? Because this could be like the darkest film in the series. So Rocky's lost his money. He has lost his boxing career because, like, you know, he's brain damaged. He can't box anymore. Adrian doesn't want him to fight. Correctly citing, it's like, look, you have nothing left to prove. Come on, it is over. After that war I watched you have with Drago, it's like, you've got nothing left to prove. But you've got this sleazy promoter, a Don King-esque promoter, George Washington Duke, who's trying to goad Balboa into a fight with Union Cade, who's like his boy, his chosen one, wants to promote the fight and get Rocky in the ring so he can make money off the fight. Now, George Washington Duke is a cartoon character, but he's an entertaining one, and he's very memorable. I'll give him that. And I guess now I'll talk about Rocky's son, played unfortunately by the late Sage Stallone. He plays Robert Balboa in this one, who had a huge growth spurt in between Rocky's 4 and 5. I guess Rocky and Adrian were in Russia for like 5 years or something, because he went from being like a 4-year-old to being like a preteen, maybe even like at that age, like 13 years old. So, okay. Where's the time jump there? That's a huge continuity gaffe if there ever was one, but with the loss of the money, Rocky and his family, they relocate back to Philly, and Rocky is trying to find his place in the world. Like, do I fit in back in Philly after being the biggest star in the boxing world? And which again would never happen in a million years. He would never lose all of his fame and all of his money under those circumstances. It would never happen. But Rocky gets inspired to open up Mick's gym again in a beautiful scene. Where Rocky has a flashback to a pep talk that Mickey gave him. Once again played by Burgess Meredith, who looks considerably older since the last time we saw him, but still a beautifully acted, beautifully delivered monologue from Burgess Meredith. One of the film's finest moments, and it was great to see Burgess Meredith again, even if it was just as a flashback. He gets inspired to open up Mick's gym and start training guys. And this brings on Tommy the Machine Gun, who is by far the weakest of Rocky's, I guess you could say, opponents or villains, but trains Tommy Gunn, and he feels like, all right, this is my place in the world now. I can be the Mickey, and he'll be the new Rocky. But ultimately, George Washington Duke, who wants that fight, draws Tommy to the dark side and promises him all these things, but really all he wants to get Balboa back in the ring, and he thinks if he can set up a student versus teacher boxing match between Rocky and Tommy Gunn, played by real-life boxer Tom Morrison, that'll be a huge gate and a huge storyline to sell that fight. And he's not wrong in that aspect, but I think the thing I really like about George Washington Duke's character is that he really is kind of Satan-like in a way. He's this tempter. He's trying to sweeten the pot to get Rocky to do things, and easily gets Tommy Gunn on his side by giving him all these things, the ill-gotten gold. And Tommy Morrison isn't a terrible actor per se, but I feel like the movie kind of wrote itself into a corner, because it's like, all right, you can't do a boxing match between Stallone or between Rocky and Machine Gun, because then Duke wins. Like, regardless of who wins the fight, Duke wins. And the whole point of the movie is that Rocky doesn't want to get into a boxing match with, or he not that he doesn't want to, but it's like he knows he shouldn't, and he has to resist the temptation to do that. So if he agrees to that fight, then George Washington Duke just wins. But then we get a street fight, and while the street fight is well done and well choreographed, supposedly choreographed by wrestling legend Terry Funk, which kind of shows if you watch the fight, it doesn't feel like an authentic Rocky movie. So that kind of rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. And then you get everything building up to it, like the drama with Rocky's son, and he's losing his son because he's paying more attention to Tommy Gunn and all that stuff, which was... It was what it was. I didn't think Sage Stallone was a bad actor necessarily in this. It's just I didn't care that much about his schoolyard troubles. It just wasn't interesting to me. And again, you get the street fight at the end, which was was entertaining, but not authentically Rocky. And I think that's part of the problem. And that, you know, combined with the whole like Rocky's ends this movie brain damaged and broke, but he has his son back, and actually the last scene at the end is nice, where he was walking up the Rocky steps with his son, and they see the statue, and you got Elton John's Measure of a Man playing, which I thought was a good song and a nice like ending song for the series. But you know, the movie just felt off, and I'm not going to say it's as terrible as everybody else says it is, but it does have those moments that work. You feel like there's a really good movie in there, but not everything gels together as well as it should. And before anybody asks, yes, I have seen what is called the work print version, or the, I guess you could call it the director's cut, for lack of a better word. That version of the film, I saw it on Dailymotion. Actually, the director, Mr. Avildsen, he leaked it online back in like the early 2000s, I think. And that cut of the film has some elements to it that are better, that I think really enhance the Satan aspect to George Washington Duke's character, especially during that ridiculous press conference scene, which makes a lot more sense in the work print version than it does in the actual theatrical cut. Also, the music choices are typically better in the work print versions, siding more with using Bill Conti's music rather than like the kind of 90s hip hop that's thrown in there and just not very good. Yeah, there's certain aspects of this film that make it stick out like a sore thumb, and I think it's better now than it was at the time, now that it's not the last one, but as is, it's still by far the weakest one in the series. Yeah, it's the most skippable of the group too, although I guess by the time you get to the sixth film, you got to be wondering, it's like, how is Rocky broke? Like, what happened in between Rocky IV and Rocky Balboa? But yeah, Rocky V, I can't bring myself to completely hate the film, because again, it does have those moments that are really good, like the Mickey flashback and the opening, or the scene that's close to the opening where Rocky and Adrian are in the locker room, various things like that. So it does have those moments, and the work print version does have a few extra moments, like Rocky trying to reconnect with his people at the bar, which is kind of sad because he gets drunk and they're kind of like, "What are you doing hanging around here, Rock? You know," and he's like, they almost make him feel like he doesn't belong anymore because of who he is and what he was. So yeah, Rocky struggles to find out who he is now as a man, a husband, and a father. There's some interesting ideas and some interesting things being played with, but it just doesn't work. And even the street fight at the end, it kind of reminds me of how in Karate Kid Part 2, they went from like a karate competition to like a fight to the death. Which that actually worked in that film, and I think the reason it doesn't work here is because we've had 4 films up to this point, and now not doing a boxing fight just feels inauthentic. But like I said, the way the script was written, you can't have Rocky fight because A, he's brain damaged and he could die, and B, you know, if he agrees to the fight, George Washington Duke wins. So they really backed themselves into a corner there. So yeah, I don't completely hate the film, but it's definitely the weakest of the series. And had this been the final Rocky film, it would have been kind of like kind of a weak ending to the series. But things were fortunately fixed with the future entries. And it's really weird. After the release of Rocky V, I think a lot of us just kind of assumed that that was going to be the last one. Although, as has been pointed out by other reviewers, namely James Rolfe of Angry Video Game Nerd fame, every Rocky movie is made to be the last one in a way, which is kind of great. And I think that's another reason I like the series so much, where they kind of just go for broke in each film and just go as hard as they can and not worry about setting up sequels or anything like that. And if they have an idea for a sequel, they'll come back and bring the series back, which they did in 2006 with that year's sixth entry into the series, Rocky Balboa, a movie I never thought would ever happen. And I should say that prior to this film's release, like in the late 90s, I remember hearing rumblings that there were ideas being thrown around that a Rocky VI would involve Rocky training Apollo Creed's son. I remember hearing that idea as far back as like the late 90s. Although we'll put a pin in that when we talk about Creed. But, you know, when word got out that this movie was going to get made, and yes, Rocky was going to fight in the ring one last time, the initial reaction was to make fun of it. I remember Family Guy did a joke about it. I remember... you know, the whole, you can't fight the Martian on Mars, there's no oxygen up there. It's like, hey, no oxygen for me means no oxygen for him. And, you know, making fun of Stallone's age. He was close to 60 years old at this point. And I think even Mad TV did like a segment, like a music video, I'm bringing Rocky back. And, you know, he has a heart attack and he's like old and broken and all this other stuff. So it just, people were making fun of it. And I was as skeptical as anybody. But what I did know is that, look, this is my chance to see a Rocky movie on the big screen. Something I'd never had the opportunity to do before. So I'm going to see this movie. But I was as skeptical as anybody. Like, I was like, I don't know what we're going to get. Given how 5 ended, I was like, I don't know what this is going to turn out to be. But again, you know, looking at where Stallone was at this career, he was pretty much out of the limelight at this point, and not the star he once was. And this movie was a chance for him to prove that he's still got one more left in him. And you know, it's very interesting. It weirdly mirrors how the first film was made, where no one really believed in it when it got made, and then it came around and surprised everybody. I remember when the reviews started coming in. And people were saying things like, oh my God, it's actually good. Some people were like salivating at the chance, like, oh, Stallone's back. We get to make fun of Stallone again. And then they saw the movie and like, oh my God, this is actually really good. Like, it's actually really, really friggin' good. And then I watched it. And yeah, it was really fucking good. A wonderful return to form for the series. And great entry. And really what this film did that was so brilliant. And I wish WWE would do this more whenever they use their old guys and their part-timers, but they made the age of the character central to the story, where no one believed in him, no one thought he should be getting into the ring, the press was making fun of him, his opponent in the film didn't take him seriously, and he had to overcome that and prove his worth. Another great example of that is Star Trek II, where the age of the characters is front and center and essential to the story, as opposed to the first Star Trek movie where they tried to hide that everybody had aged after after the show ended. And it's like, I think I like the way 2 handled it better. It's like, yeah, they're old, just treat them like they're old. And you get a much better movie out of it. And I think that's the same case here. They didn't treat Rocky like he was still the world heavyweight champion. They treated him like he was a product of a bygone era, you know, and he was done. And it was just, all he had to do was wait for his life to end, basically. And here, one of the most, like, you want to talk about tearjerkers in the Rocky series, I think this movie has more tearjerker scenes than any movie in the series. Where, you know, we find out that Adrian had passed away in between films. We find out that, you know, he was running a restaurant named Adrian's in her honor. And that's what Rocky's basically just a local celebrity that tells people stories and runs a restaurant. That's basically his life now. He's kind of estranged from his son, still has a relationship with Polly, but Polly's kind of a jerk. And doesn't want to remember the past because of how sad it makes him. One of the huge tearjerker moments is the ice rink. They revisit the ice rink from the first film where Rocky and Adrian had their first date. And Paulie and Rocky's interaction in there during that scene will just break your heart. And there's a lot of things where Rocky gets, he's going through a midlife crisis, basically. And, entering his twilight years, he doesn't know what he's supposed to do. And losing Adrian, he's lost his support system. And he basically doesn't know what he's doing. And that scene where he breaks down and says he feels like he's got like a beast inside of him, that is also a great acting moment from Stallone, truth be told. Stallone gives like the performance of a lifetime here in a lot of ways. And the scene where he applies for a boxing license, which I guess I'll go back and talk about it, where Rocky gets interested in fighting again because of a computer simulated fight where they put Rocky up against the current world heavyweight champion, Mason the Line Dixon. Love that name. And Rocky won the simulated fight. And he gets the itch to like get back in the ring, so he's got to apply for his license. You get that great speech where he's like, nobody's got the right to tell me to do what, nobody's got the right to tell me what I can and can't do, especially when whatever. It's a great speech. Go listen to it. There's a lot of great moments like that in the film. He has an awesome speech with his son, who's begging him, practically pleading with him to not go through with the fight. And Rocky basically puts him in his place and helps repair the relationship between him and his son. And that's the other interesting thing about this film. More time passed, production-wise, as far as the film goes, more time passed between Rocky V and this film than the time passed between Rocky I and Rocky V. So that's how big of a gap there was before we got this film. And the passage of time is certainly felt here, where the world is changing and it's kind of leaving Rocky behind. And he's trying to, find one last... trying to prove himself one last time. And you get so many great, beautiful moments. They bring back Little Marie from the first film, and she ends up befriending Rocky. He gives her a job at the restaurant. He befriends her son, and she's the one that kind of motivates him. It's like, just do it. Like, who cares what other people think? And Geraldine Hughes plays the role of Little Marie, and kind of underrated. I thought she was very believable and charming in this film. And, there could have been more of a romantic element between her and Rocky in this, but they don't really go down that route too much. But I think is a nice supporting role. I think she fits into the film quite well. And, Burt Young returns as Paulie, and he's Paulie, he's a jerk, but then he redeems himself. So it's just kind of that's just what that relationship was, right? There's actually a deleted scene with Paulie where he just breaks down into tears, mourning the loss of Adrian. And it's one of the most heartbreaking things I've ever seen in my life. I'm like, why did they cut that out of the movie? It's so good. I guess they figured there's enough crying scenes in the movie that they didn't want to overdo it. But, I guess I'll talk about Mason Dixon, who I feel is an underrated opponent for Rocky. I think he's one of the better ones in the series, actually. And the reason I say that, he's not an over-the-top cartoon character like Clubber Lang or even Ivan Drago to a degree. He's not flashy and exciting like Apollo Creed. But what he does offer is this very human element to him where the world hates him and has rejected him because he wins all his fights too easily and they don't believe that he's a real, true fighting champion. So he's looking to prove himself as well. So in a way, this is just as much his story as it is Rocky's, where he's also trying to prove something, and why he wants, ultimately agrees to the fight, because he's just trying to get something to happen that'll get the people to like him and respect him. And little does he know, he's got the fight of his life just right around the corner with Rock. And there's a lot of good scenes that highlight aspects to Mason Dixon's character and his frustration. There's a great scene with him and his trainer, Marvin, where Marvin talks about you need to be tested. Baptism by fire, and that's good. That's good. A great scene, and there's a lot of little good moments like that with Mason Dixon. I was like, I think he's one of the better characters that Rocky's ever had to go up against, and he doesn't always get the credit. And he's played by real-life boxer Antonio Tarver, who I think does a good job of portraying a champion-level boxer. Does it quite well, and I think he serves the story quite well. I like Mason Dixon quite a bit. I think he's one of my more favorite Rocky opponents, which says a lot. He's certainly better than Tommy Gunn. We can all agree to that. But you know, everything kind of builds with all the human drama and the emotions. I guess my only problems with the film, there are a couple like things that probably needed to be explained a little bit more. Like I mentioned, Rocky hanging out with Little Marie's son. There are some deleted scenes that kind of enhance that relationship a little bit more. But as is in the film, it's just kind of like, he befriends her son, and then he kind of disappears, and then he comes back to help Rocky train and help be in his corner at the end of the fight. But he's not really a fully fleshed out character. I felt like there was more to do with him, and some of the deleted scenes seem to point to that. But yeah, maybe if they just left some of the deleted scenes in the movie, it would have been perfect. But there's that. I wish they had left the Paulie scene in there. I think that was a very emotional scene that I would have liked to have seen included. But for the most part, I think it's got that down-to-earth, raw human drama that was present in the first film and the second film. So it's kind of, again, a true return to his roots for Rocky. What 5 was trying to do, this movie succeeds at. And here we go again, Rocky, the ultimate underdog. Nobody believes that he can beat Mason Dixon. Title's not even on the line. It's just a glorified sparring session, as they call it. But, you know, old versus young, skill versus will. And it's one of the most believable fights in the series. Very well executed, very well edited. It has, I love that you incorporating the HBO boxing match, boxing pay-per-view fight feel. Using Michael Buffer is great, and he would actually return in Creed and Creed 2 as well. So it's like, oh god, Michael Buffer, he makes everything better. He makes everything better. So the fight has this large atmosphere to it, and early on it looks like Rocky's going to get dominated, and it's like, oh, this doesn't look good. But then a miracle happens. Mason Dixon breaks his hand on Rocky's hip, and that's the opening that Rocky needed, and he kind of comes through. And, you know, shows off his hurtin' bombs. As I guess I'll go back to the training. We do get a great training montage, which is just a standard, a staple of the series. He gets trained by Tony, once again, who returns to the series. It's great to have him back. And, again, a small role, but he has one of the best moments in the film where he gives a speech about building hurtin' bombs. Every time you hit him, it's got to feel like he tried kissing the expressway. Yeah! Let's start building some hurtin' bombs. It's like one last performance from him, and it was on point. It was just a great, great scene. But yeah, we get the training montage and all that great stuff. Gonna Fly Now returns. It's all great. Running up the steps, all great. And so we get to this really realistic looking fight, and once Mason Dixon breaks his hand, it's like, oh my god, the fight's on, and Rocky might have a shot here. And they ultimately go the full 10 rounds, and both men get what they were ultimately trying to achieve. Rocky gets to go out the way he goes out, tells Paulie at the end of the fight, the beast is gone now, the beast is out, and Mason Dixon wins his respect. So everybody gets what they want, and mirroring the first film, Mason Dixon wins the fight by judge's decision. But Rocky got what he wanted. He's built a new family for himself. He went out the way he wanted to go out, and has one last day in the sun, in the spotlight before going off into the sunset. So wonderful ending. Great stuff. Wonderful farewell to the Rocky Balboa character. Had this been the last film, and we get one last scene of him visiting Adrian at the cemetery, leaving flowers on the grave and saying, "Yo, Adrian, we did it," which is a huge, like, final, like, tearjerker moment. So had this been the end, I think it would have been a superb ending, a wonderful return to form for the series, and far surpassed any and all expectations that anybody had of it, and any, like, reasonable person that I could have ever expected out of this film. The major negative that I can say about this film, and it's really not the film's fault per se, but because this film was so well received, I think this is the movie that started the whole, like, oh yeah, we can bring a bunch of old stuff back, because immediately after this, you know, Indiana Jones came back, Rambo came back, but I actually like the new Rambo, but, you know, and now we're living in this age where everything's like a bunch of reboots and restarts and remakes and whatever, so, Yeah, I think Rocky Balboa was the movie that kind of started it, but Rocky Balboa was actually good, and turns out Stallone actually had a story to tell. So, excellent film, excellent entry in the series. Not as good as like Rocky 1 and 2, but in the upper tier of the best entries in the series, I would say. So that was the end of Rocky's boxing career, and I think many of us kind of assumed the end of his time as an on-screen character, but we got a return for the series under a new director, new vision, and a new character to center on. The son of Apollo Creed, Adonis Hollywood Creed, or Johnson if you prefer. And we got 2015's Creed, which was, all about passing the torch of the series and working within the continuity of the Rocky series, but passing the torch to this character. And I love the idea of Rocky training Apollo Creed's son. I liked the idea when I first heard it back in the 90s. I thought that could be a good idea for a sequel, and I was open to the idea for this movie, and I even thought, even if it's bad, like, it doesn't ruin Rocky Balboa, so it's like, do it. What have they got to lose? And, this movie was excellent. This movie, I was blown away by how good it was. It works within the Rocky formula, and I think a lot of people would probably use that as a criticism of it, but it does it with a fresh character, with a fresh personality, fresh music, using a bunch of rap songs and everything else to kind of give the film its own take and its own personality, which is all great, by the way. Great use of it. He comes out to Hail Mary, and actually his opponent, Pretty Ricky Conlan, comes out and with an entrance that would make The Undertaker shit his pants. It's so awesome. Probably the best entrance in the whole series. The directorial style is so stylized, and you get the one fight in the middle, Donnie's first real big fight with Rocky as his trainer, and you get that one take fight where the entire fight is all done in one take and one shot. It looks terrific, looks amazing, and then you get to the final fight with Conlan, and that fight looks terrific, and then you get all the human drama with Donnie and the build-up, and really the heart of the film is the relationship between Adonis and Rocky. But I guess we'll start with like the beginning. Let's start with like the beginning of the film. One of my favorite opening scenes to any movie ever. It just set the tone so perfectly. So it turns out that this son of Apollo Creed is an illegitimate child from an affair that he had in the 80s, and this kid died before, Apollo Creed died before the kid was born. And his mother died, and he's living in juvie right now. Gets into fights, he's got an anger management problem, he's a bit of a hothead. And one day, Apollo Creed's wife, who was played beautifully by Felicia Rashad of Cosby Show fame, she, again, it's kind of a small role, but she really leaves an impression. And does great here and in Creed 2 as well. I really like the casting. It's a casting change because it's not the original actress who played Apollo Creed's wife back in the 80s. She's since passed away, unfortunately. But Felicia Rashad, I thought, really left an impression here. So this opening scene, she comes in and offers to let Donnie live with her. So she wants to take in Apollo's illegitimate son and raise her as a son and give him a home. Which is very big of her, I have to say. It's like, God, that woman's a saint. But finds out after her husband died that he cheated on her and had a son, and she decides she wants to raise the kid. It's like, that woman is a good woman. Great mom, great wife. Damn. But anyway, she's talking to Donnie, who's, I think, like 11 at this point, something around that age. And had just gotten into a scuffle earlier that day because, as he put it, well, I'm not going to repeat exactly what he said, but I said this kid said something about his mom, so he beat his ass. And so you get this scene where she offers to she tells Adonis that, yes, you had a father. He passed away before you were born, but you had a father. He was my husband, and I want you to come live with me. And Adonis ultimately agrees to it, but before he does, he asks the question, what was his name? Fade to black, and then the title card Creed shows up. I'm like, oh, God. Chills. I got chills while watching that. Excellent opening scene, and from that moment, I was hooked. I was like, all right, dude, I'm down for whatever this movie's going to throw at me, because I think we're in for a wild ride. And Adonis grows up, gets a good job, but he can't shirk his anger management issues, his personal issues dealing with living in his dad's shadow, his personal issues being illegitimate, and so many other things. And he wants to go into boxing, wants to be a fighter, but nobody wants to train him because of who he is. And him being Apollo Creed's son, illegitimate son, is also a bit of a family secret that the family doesn't want to have get out. So that's another thing that keeps him from getting into the professional ranks at boxing. So he ultimately decides, against his mother's wishes and against the wishes of virtually everybody, he's going to go to Philadelphia, leave the life of luxury that he's currently leading in LA, go to Philadelphia and get Rocky Balboa to train him. And that's the scene where he meets Rocky is a terrific scene. He calls Rock Unc because he's basically like family. You're like my uncle. We get what I really liked about both Creed 1 and Creed 2 is that they play with the Rocky mythology a bit and take those like kind of aspects of it that maybe some of us wondered about, like Donnie asking Rocky who won the third fight between Apollo and Rocky, something that we never knew. And we finally get an answer to it all these years later, and it doesn't feel cheap. It feels believable. And Rocky ultimately agrees to train Donnie, and really it's their relationship that's the heart of the film. He also gets a love interest, played by Tessa Thompson, Bianca, who is a girl with progressive hearing loss, but is a singer. So she's a musician and a singer, and she's trying to get her music career off the ground before she loses her hearing permanently. And their interactions are cute. I think they're very adorable together. But unfortunately, the romance isn't as essential to the plot as Rocky and Adrian's was in the first Rocky movie. Although, let's put a pin in that, and we'll come back to that in Creed 2, which I'll talk about in a bit. But much like Rocky before him, Adonis has something kind of thrown at his feet, because while Rocky's training him, it comes out that he's Apollo Creed's illegitimate son. And when that happens, Pretty Ricky Conlan, who is the light heavyweight champion, is facing a jail sentence and is probably going to be put into forced retirement from boxing, needs to have one last fight before he serves out his sentence. And he broke his opponent's jaw at the weigh-in because he's a hot-headed moron and a bit of an asshole. And realizing they need a fight on short notice, they realize that Donnie is Creed's son, and they can sell Pretty Ricky Conlan versus the son of Apollo Creed as an attraction. So very much like the first Rocky movie, Adonis gets the chance of a lifetime, but he has to come to terms with whether or not he wants to take the name Creed, because he wants to make it on his own and not live in his father's shadow, but ultimately embraces, throughout the course of the film, he embraces that he's a Creed, especially once the fight is concluded. But everything builds up very well, and then you get that unfortunate series of events where Rocky gets diagnosed with cancer and is knocking on death's door and ultimately accepts death, where he's just like, no, I'm not going to fight it. I saw what happened with my wife. I'm just going to accept what happens, and whatever happens, happens. And it's like, what? No, Rocky can't die. What? No, don't do this to me, movie. And trust me, if Rocky had died, I would have bawled in the theater like a bitch, because I love the character that much. But through their bond and their relationship, Donnie inspires Rocky to fight cancer. It's like, if I fight, you fight. And so Rocky trains Donnie, but Donnie also helps him get through his chemotherapy, and resulting in a very emotional training montage where you get all the badass training moments with him, like running, Adonis running down the street while the bikes and everything are chasing him, which looks terrific. The badass music that's playing, which is great. You also get it intercut with these like moments of Rocky not doing so well, and the chemotherapy is really having its toll on him. Rocky's fighting for his life, and Donnie's fighting to have the fight of his life against Pretty Ricky Conlan, who, I guess I'll talk about Pretty Ricky now, played by a real-life boxer, I forget his name, but not one of my more favorite villains. He's kind of like cut from the same cloth as Mr. T or Clubber Lang, where he's basically just an asshole, but not as colorful as Mr. T. He seems to be there just to have the fight, and that's really just his role in the story, and that's about it. So not saying he's like terrible or anything. He's better than Tommy Gunn, that's for sure, but he's really just kind of a one-note asshole, although him giving Donnie respect after the fight was pretty cool and pretty satisfying. So he has his moments, and like I said, his entrance is like the most badass thing I've ever seen in my life. But what you get here It comes fight time, and Donnie takes the name Creed for the fight. And he goes the full 12 rounds, goes the distance, much like Rocky before him. But you get these great moments between Rocky and Donnie during the fight, specifically right before the last round, where Rocky wants to throw in the towel after the beating that Adonis is taking. But Adonis is like, no, let me finish. I got to prove it. Prove what? Prove that I'm not a mistake. And it's like, oh, God damn it, these movies. And by the way, I also got tears in my eyes when his mom sent him like Apollo's colors, basically, with Johnson on the back of the tights and Creed on the front of the tights. I'm like, oh my God. Oh, God. So many feels. But anyway, Adonis finishes the fight, knocking down Pretty Ricky for the first time in his career. But Ricky gets up before the 10 count and preserves his title, ultimately wins the fight by judge's decision. But he gets his respect. The crowd respects him. And Pretty Ricky gives him respect, and he, as one of the commentators for the fight put it, which is once again presented beautifully with the HBO style stuff, and also just great directing and a great stylized version of the fight where every hit looks like it hurts. And you get Donnie wins even though he lost, and again, very much like the Rocky movie. And we get probably my favorite closing scene of any Rocky movie, which is saying a lot, where Donnie and Rocky are walking up the Rocky steps together, because he's getting better, he's healing, but he still looks like he's gone through hell. And that scene of Adonis walking Rocky up the Rocky steps is just like, oh my God, if you're a lifelong fan, that is just... I mean, you want a tearjerker, that's a huge tearjerker right there, and a beautiful ending to the movie. And really, again, it's appropriate that it ended with both of them. And if you'll notice, the music actually starts off with like Rocky music, and then as they make it to the top of the stairs, it transitions into Creed's theme, which to me symbolizes like the passing of the torch. And so much great stuff in this film. This film was so good. And a wonderful like continuation of the series. If you can't have Rocky as the boxer, I think Donnie is a great character to follow. You feel what he's going throughout the entire time, and he grows and evolves throughout the series, where he has to kind of get over his own deficiencies, like his temper and his own like insecurities about his father and who his father was and who he is and where he belongs in this world. I think all of that feels very real and very human, and handled very well. Excellent boxing sports drama film, and a great return to the series. And immediately after this film was over, I just couldn't help myself, but I just thought immediately, I want to see a second one. I want to see what happens with the second one, which we finally got in 2018, Creed 2, which went exactly where I wanted them to go. Creed does battle with the son of Ivan Drago, the son of the man that killed his father. It's basically Rocky IV Part 2 / Creed 2. And with that as a premise, there was no way on this earth I wasn't going to go see this movie. I saw it last week. I saw it opening night with a lively audience that was very receptive to everything that was going on in the film. And I'm going to keep my review of this film brief because I don't want to give away spoilers. I just want to say that the film was very, very good. It was awesome. It was an emotional roller coaster. The fights are absolutely vicious in this film. Ivan Drago's son, Victor Drago, is like a rabid animal, like a beast. The relationship between Bianca and Adonis, which I said wasn't the strongest part of the first film, I totally fell in love with them as a couple in this film, and I feel all the struggles that they go through. And again, I don't want to give anything away, but I thought their relationship was a lot stronger in this film than it was in the first one, and more essential to the plot. And there's a moment with Bianca right before the fight at the end that was a tearjerker for me, even though it wasn't designed to be a tearjerker. What the moment meant to me and what I assumed it meant to the characters really kind of got me right here in the feels. So, and there's a lot of moments like that. The relationship between Rocky and Adonis is still strong. The training montage is absolutely insane and is great. This is a movie that successfully had its cake and ate it too, because it's got enough over-the-top elements from Rocky IV but it's still got those grounded human elements from the previous Creed and the first two Rocky movies and Rocky Balboa. So it's kind of like, I don't know how this movie did it, but it managed to do everything well. And it's, personally speaking, it's my personal favorite film of 2018 and a great, great entry in this long-running series. And at this point, if the torch wasn't passed before, it is now. It's Creed series now, and I kind of want to see a third one. I'm kind of like, I've got ideas of like what a third one. I've heard people propose ideas, like maybe they could put Adonis in the Olympics. Maybe they could play off the Mayweather-McGregor fight and do an MMA versus boxing, only do it as an MMA fight and put Donnie in an MMA ring. And I'm like, ooh, God, what could they do? Could they get like a stand-in for McGregor and like believably be like Conor McGregor? Because that could be awesome. Like create their own in-movie version of Conor McGregor. That could be amazing if they do it right. And but for right now, I thought Creed 2 was an amazing movie. It's my favorite film of the year. It gave me everything I wanted. And again, I'm trying to avoid as many spoilers as possible. But one other thing I will say, if you never thought you could feel any emotion for Ivan Drago or anyone in the Drago family, watch this movie, because I completely understood emotionally where they were coming from, what motivated them, and ultimately what happened to them at the end of the fight. I actually empathized with them a little bit. So it was amazing that I could actually feel empathy for the Dragos. After what happened in Rocky IV and the way they're presented in this film. Very effectively handled. And again, through very little dialogue. It's handled mostly through visuals, but it's handled very effectively and without a lot of like straight up like long dialogue sequences. It's handled mostly through visual. You just kind of experience what they go through, and it's all very believable. And I thought Dolph Lundgren gave a good performance. You know, here's a guy who was never known as a great actor. Rocky IV, he left an impression, but he stayed mostly silent. And then, you know, he started putting out movies like The Punisher and Masters of the Universe, and that told you everything you needed to know about Dolph Lundgren as an actor. And then you saw him in films like Universal Soldier, where he completely hammed it up, and it's like, okay, this is what we're dealing with. And then you see him in Arrow, the bit part he had in Arrow, and I'm like, wow, he was actually pretty good in that. Then you watch him in this film, it's like, whoa, Dolph's actually pretty good. What happened? So I don't know, but yeah, I thought Dolph was great in this film as well. But yeah, Creed 2 was excellent. If you have not seen it yet, I highly recommend going out and checking it out. If you're a fan of the series like I am, it gives you everything you want. So I absolutely adored this film. I thought it was great. I cannot wait to watch it again. So that's my recommendation. But that concludes my review of the Rocky series. Thank you all for watching and letting me nerd out here over my favorite film franchise of all time. And it was so great to see yet another strong entry in the series after all these years. You know, over 40 years this series has been in existence, and they are still going strong after all these years. And that to me is awesome. Awesome indeed. And, you know, out of 8 films, I would probably give an A grade to 7 of those 8 films. Maybe I'm exaggerating, but I just love the movies that much. I love the series. I love everything about it. Terrific, terrific stuff. And again, some people say that these films are formulaic, but I think all the films play with the formula enough to make them different and give them each their own unique identity. And because of that, each film kind of feels like a different film, even if they all kind of follow the same structure. So, you know, if you've never watched the Rocky movies, I say binge them. Just start with 1 and just binge your way all the way through. Even get through 5. Because you need to know how Rocky wound up broke in Rocky 6. But I say get through them, and you won't regret it. I think the films are excellent. I love these movies, and I'm going to watch. I've probably watched them all like 50 times each, and I'm going to watch them 50 times more before I'm dead. It's just a terrific, terrific string of films, and I just love them. I think they're terrific. So thank you for watching this video and allowing me to nerd out over this series of films that I love so much. And thank you to everybody associated with making these films, from the cast and crew to Stallone to all the directors that have worked on it, the composer, the music composers, the ones who provided songs, everybody that contributed something to the Rocky series. Thank you so much, because you have given me an endless amount of fond memories and badass moments over the years throughout my entire life, and I really, really do appreciate it. So that concludes this long-ass video. I've got a few more videos lined up for you this week, so stay tuned for those. But for right now, I am done, so peace out, everybody.